Hey everyone, welcome to the show. We have got a great one lined up for you tonight. With more than 200 million views on YouTube and over a billion with a B on Facebook, my guest tonight is on pace to be a surefire first ballot social media Hall of Famer. Please welcome to the show comedian, writer, actor, and Nobel Peace Prize nominee, Steve Hofstetter. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure, Steve. I'll tell you, it's amazing. On this show, we talk about people's journeys, and in many cases, they've worn a few hats along the way. But your journey and all the things you've done and accomplished really blew me away. And I'm hoping we can cover as many of them as we can in our conversation. And what I'd like to do is kind of turn the clock back and maybe start back at the beginning, which I believe for you, your journey started in New York City, right?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you consider the beginning. Now, my journey started in New York City, no matter what, because I'm born there.
Right.
But I first started getting into comedy. I was doing improv when I was 13 years old,
Oh, wow.
and so yeah, long before stand up, it's not something I intended to do. There was a girl that I had a crush on who suggested I should join the improv group, and as a shy, introverted kid, I was so excited that someone that I liked found me funny and, or funny enough to do improv. She quit 2 weeks later, but I was already hooked, and she had no interest in me, but I was already hooked. I didn't even try to go on stage, but there was a rule that first timers had to go up. So, and I was, getting laughs and getting attention, positive attention for the first time in my life. And that's really what stuck with me.
And you said that's when you were 13 you
I was
started?
13. Yeah. I was lucky enough that my school had an improv group. It was, as a middle school kid, that's not usually something you have access to.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we also appreciate our first and longest running sponsor of the show, Tom and his team of insurance professionals at the Malin Agency. If world-class customer service and doing business with someone you can trust is important to you, give Tom and his team a call today for all your insurance needs. Absolutely. That's amazing. Now, were there other things that you were interested in as well back at that age, at that young age?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Baseball, which I'm still interested
Yeah.
in, as you can see by my backdrop. I got interested in comic book art, and guitar, and just things that other people in my life were interested in, and I was kind of almost like trying things on, if that makes sense.
Oh, wow.
But improv is the one that really landed. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a great baseball fan, just not, that wasn't something I was going to do with the rest of my life.
Oh no, I understand. Yeah, I think that a lot of us at one time, whether it was baseball, football, whatever sport, and then you kind of realize there's only a certain percentage that make it, but really there's only a certain percentage that make it in the arts as well. And so what I'm curious about is as you were getting into, high school and kind of moving on, was that bug still with you as far as the improv and the comedy? Did you ever give thought to maybe pursuing any other careers, or did the comedy bug stick with you throughout?
Well, comedy in like baseball is a war of attrition. I mean, how many times have you heard the story of, oh, I threw 92 in high school, but then I blew out my arm? And stand up is similar to that in that, like, so many of the people I started with, I just watched quit because they prioritized something else, whether it was family or money or addiction. There are a lot of things that can get in the way. For me, my school started in my school had middle school and high school together.
Okay.
So, I joined the improv group in 8th grade, ended up becoming, I think in 10th grade, I became like one of the co-chairs of it, and, did that through high school. And then in college, first week of college, when I'm seeing what's out there and the clubs and stuff, I see there's an improv group and I'm like, oh, great. And I went and I nailed the audition and I didn't even get a call back. And at first I was so like, what the hell is this?
Wow.
I saw people get callbacks that were garbage. And then I realized, oh, they want to hang out with their friends. That's the point of this. No one's doing this college improv group because because they want to become professional improvisers. First of all, no such thing. But also, it is, I guess it's a little different now that, with social media, but certainly at the time, the way to become a professional improviser was to become an improv teacher. And so like, I just kind of dropped it. And it was, I was always interested in stand-up. I had written down a couple of ideas of jokes that I wanted to do. And then my senior year of college, we went out for a friend of mine's birthday to this bar that also had like a stand-up show. And this was, quintessential New York City stand-up. This was the back room of a bar that sat 60 people and yet had Mark Maron and Cyrus Silverman and, Ed Helms when he was starting out and Dimitri Martin when he was starting out. And it was amazing that it was this mix of people who were passing out flyers for stage time and the best of the best headliners.
Wow.
And so, we got barked into a show, and I talked to one of the producers after about how I always wanted to try it. And I was kind of tricked into giving him money for lessons. One of these things where like, I don't think he actually taught, but he saw the opportunity to say he taught. But then, from there, I just started doing it.
Wow. So what was your major in college? Were you looking to get into any other field at all at the time?
Well, I went to Columbia, which doesn't really allow you to major in a discipline. It makes you major in a department.
Oh,
Columbia's philosophy is we got to make sure you're so well-rounded that you're not particularly good at anything. And so you couldn't even major in, like, I would love to have majored in writing or journalism, but they have the best journalism grad school in the world, so they don't want to funnel any of the resources to the undergrads. And then there's 2 journalism undergrad courses. I mean, I don't know, this is 20 years ago, so who knows what happens now, or more than 20 years ago. But, my only option was an English major with like a writing minor. And the English department was, oh my God, they're like, all right, read this old book. It's good because it's old. And I very much do not, ascribe to that philosophy. So I ended up a history major and, concentration in American history, still did the writing minor. But it's not something that I intended to use. I wanted to be a print journalist. Like that was my goal. And so I figured history was a good, I enjoyed the classes and it would be a good basis for that. And then I would eventually go to journalism school. And then I kind of got derailed on the way.
Well, you did end up doing some writing though, right? As a columnist, in the sports world with Sports Illustrated, NHL and things like that, right?
Yeah, I've done a ton of writing. I was collegehumor.com's first writer. I was a columnist for Sports Illustrated. I wrote for everything from Maxim to the New York Times, et cetera. I've written a couple of books. It's still something that's part of me, but when I graduated, like I wanted to be a beat writer. And I graduated as the dot-com bubble burst, which meant a bunch of these mid-level writers were coming back to entry-level jobs. So the entry-level jobs were almost impossible to get. And here I was, someone who, had already been published several times, who was doing freelance for bigger publications that I was applying to as a beat guy. But I couldn't get a job because there just weren't jobs. And finally, I got a job offer covering high school baseball in Freeport, Illinois. And I said, absolutely not. I will not starve myself in order to write about how a 15-year-old is going to be the next big thing. And, 2 hours from the nearest bus to the nearest airport. And so I had said no. And then, I just started kind of doing stand-up to pass the time. And the way that I put it in my book is it was like being thrown into the ocean and finding out I was a fish the whole time. Like
Wow.
I really felt like I could breathe. I had done it, once in college. And then after I graduated, I was living at my dad's place. I couldn't find a gig. Writing columns here and there. I was picking up a little extra money with terrible jobs in the literary world. I did copy editing for a magazine that only interviewed C-suite executives. So I'm basically, poor, starving, and having to edit these just mouthpieces for rich people. It was awful. But stand up was the saving grace.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you felt that way when you started doing it again. So what are some of your favorite early memories, Steve, from those first few gigs that you had or first couple years in the business? Because like you said, you took to it like a fish to water. So what are some of your favorite memories from those days?
I think there's certainly horror stories. But in terms of, I guess inspirational was I was doing this show at MIT and I was doing it with two of my buddies. And, we went up there and we were getting paid garbage. And, it was one of those things where like we were going to break even on the gas to Boston. And, oh, sorry, Cambridge. We were going to break even on the gas to Cambridge. And it was such a terrible setup for a show. It's a classroom, proscenium seating, but it's still just a classroom. All the lights are on. There's no stage. There's no real mic to speak of. And my buddies who, were both good, they were just, bombing. And I was waiting to go on and I was still excited to go on. And, as a sports fan, there's that phrase, they use it in the replacements, winners want the ball.
Oh yeah.
And growing up playing sports, I was never confident enough in my abilities to want the ball. I wanted to be in the on-deck circle when someone hit the home run. I wanted to be next to the person celebrating the touchdown. Like I was not good enough to actually want to be, want the ball with the game on the line. And that was the first time I realized anything in my life that, oh, I want the ball. Like I still believe in myself enough that even in this hard environment for stand-up, I can still do it. And that really changed how I looked at comedy. That was the day that I was just like, okay, yeah, this forever.
Yeah, it's amazing, Steve. So many of the comedians that I've talked to, they've talked about, how long it took to like find their voice or to get comfortable, different variations of kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that epiphany for you at that time was kind of it. That's what changed your whole trajectory.
Well, yeah, but I want to be clear. I did not find my voice yet. I just found my love for it.
Right. But the confidence, though, is a big part of it, right?
Yeah, and that comes and goes, but just that was for me, it was less about the confidence and more about the desire to do it.
Okay.
And people all the time when they ask a comedian like, "Oh, what's your advice for someone starting out comedy?" My advice is quit. Don't do it. Don't even think about doing it. Because if that is enough to get someone to stop, then they would have stopped anyway. And you may as well save yourself the years of heartache. The only reason to do this is if you cannot picture yourself doing anything else. Wow. It takes so long to be successful. It is such a lonely lifestyle for most comics, over a decade before you really get, any tangible success so that you could even have a family without destroying yourself. And, so I tell people, don't do it.
Steve, I have to say, one of the questions I was going to ask you was, in addition to some of those memories, was what were some of the lessons that you learned early on? And that sounds like a pretty important lesson right there, that don't do it unless you don't have a plan B and don't want to have a plan B. You got to be all in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also don't do it unless you're having fun. Some of the best advice I got, I was about 5 years in and I'm watching comics who I wouldn't even be willing to hire to open for me. I was lucky. I was headlining early and, I was making money on the road, but I was watching comics that I wouldn't trust to open for me get television spots. And it was driving me nuts. And I had become friends with Jimmy Brogan, who, wonderful comic, and had booked The Tonight Show for 5 years. So he knew what he was doing when it came to TV. And I asked him, I called him up and I was like, what the hell am I doing wrong? And he goes, are you comfortable? Like, can you get a roof over your head? You feeding yourself? You okay? I said, yeah. And he goes, are you having fun? I said, yeah. And he goes, then shut up and have fun. And that was phenomenal advice. And less than a year later, I got my first television spot because I wasn't worried about it anymore. I was just focused on enjoying comedy, and that helps you get better.
Wow, that is some valuable advice and valuable lesson learned there for sure, Steve. Now, I've learned also another key piece of this, and I'm curious with your background from a writing standpoint. Obviously, you've written books, written columns, all those kind of things. What does your writing process look like as a comedian?
It changes constantly, but I've got to the point now where I decide what I want to talk about, and then I start writing about it and try to, sometimes I will sit down in front of a computer and here's an idea that I want to just kind of hash out, and I do a lot of writing on stage. There's a lot of I have this premise and I'm going to give myself room to extend it, and then also I tour with support acts that I trust and love, and they know my voice and I know theirs, and we write together all the time. There'll be so often that I'll be like, all right, I have this idea that I want to work on, and it's brainstorming. And sometimes some of the best tags in my act have been written by friends, and some of the best tags in my act have been responses to ideas that I didn't like from my friends. And it's a combination of both. And I think writing with other people that you respect is so important.
Wow. No, that's interesting to hear because to me, I've seen over the years, I've had the opportunity to have conversations with amazing musical artists, singers, songwriters, Hall of Fame, country music, rock and roll music, Hall of Famers, and the writing and finding the right people to write with there, just like here in the comedy business seems critical. And another key piece, Steve, that I've heard from a lot of folks is especially today, there's a lot of great comics out there. They'll try to get a gig somewhere, and the first thing they're asked is, "What's your social media following? How many followers
Yeah.
do you have on Instagram or Facebook or whatever?" And there's some great comics, some legendary comics out there that just maybe don't have the following yet. Clearly, that's not the issue for you. How did you build this incredible following and presence on social media that you have?
Well, I mean, a couple of ways. One, I didn't shy away from who I am.
Hmm.
Um, if you write for your audience, you will not accomplish anything. If you write something you believe in, your audience will find you.
Hmm.
Also, I paid attention. It is a science. Like it is, comedy is one of the few things that is an art, a science, and a business all at the same time. And you have to understand all three of them in order to make it work. Also, like the two things that really bother me about people recoiling about social media or things like that. First of all, we used to have to do morning radio. The way to promote was to wake up at 5 in the morning in Topeka, Kansas, and go on their wacky radio show where they interrupted your jokes and played slide whistles over your punchlines. And that was how you filled a room. And people are like, well, I don't want to spend all this time on Instagram. And I'm like, I love it compared to what we used to have to do. The
Wow.
the idea of we used to have to censor ourselves and and basically be just shuck and jive for this now dead medium. And the fact that we can build our own thing now is incredible. The other thing is we seek to be original on stage. The worst insult you can give a comedian is telling them that they're a hack. The idea that we constantly, we want to be original, we want to be different, we don't want to be derivative, and then a comedian will get off stage, and when it comes to their promotion, they will be the hackiest, most derivative piece of unoriginal garbage you've ever seen. And take the creative muscle that you use every day on stage and apply it to the world around you. Don't just make the same poster someone else made. Don't just say, in 2006, being on MySpace was great because it was early. By 2008, when people were like, oh, I got to set up a MySpace, by then it didn't work anymore.
Right.
And so you can't just look at what someone else did and copy it. Look like Sarah Cooper during the pandemic was doing those amazing Trump lip sync videos. And the reason that they popped was because she was clever, she was interesting, and she was doing something other people weren't doing. And then a bunch of other people were like, oh, I'll just do that. I'll just do that same thing. And nobody cared because it was unoriginal. So you have to find your original voice in order to rise up.
That is, I'll tell you, I'm literally like a sponge soaking this up, Steve, because I really like what you said about, you've got to be yourself, and your people will find you, and things like that. Because as someone who, in addition to hosting the show and being in the corporate world, and just graduated from a stand-up comedy class, and already trying to think about who do I want to be, trying to appease people and appeal, and rather than just like, maybe I'll just try to do what I do and see who likes it, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So I really
100%. And
appreciate that.
also figure out why they like it, because that will allow you to lean into other aspects of it. I know that like the thing that made me pop was heckler videos. And I had to think about, okay, well, I can't just be all heckler videos. Like that can't be my only social media presence. So what do people like about those videos? Why are they resonating? And I realized it is a combination of catharsis, it's social justice, because most of the heckler videos that do the best are like when I, come down pretty hard on a sexist or a homophobic person or something like that. It's me not being afraid to stand up for what I believe in, and it's quickness. Those
Yeah.
are the things of those videos that are resonating. So then when I started making these political videos, these explainer videos, etc., I leaned into those same aspects, which are all part of what I do, but it allowed me to understand what's resonating with people about what I do. And so I was able to shift without losing that core audience and without losing myself in the process.
Yeah, that's one thing that jumps out at me, Steve, is that the quickness, your wit, your cerebral. Like I was describing you to a friend who just started watching some of your videos too, and it's just that combination of things, but it's genuine and authentic. I think those are key words to describe what you put out there too. You're being who and what you are. And speaking of being out there and who and what you are, you're going to be on tour, I know, later in September, coming here to suburban Philadelphia to the Keswick. So you've got other stops on the tour too. So what do you got coming up here the rest of 2025 other than that big date at the Keswick?
Over 100 more cities before the end of the year. I'm doing a 2 month tour. I by the time this airs, it will have just started. 55 cities in 2 months in I think it's like 22 states and 5 provinces. It's going to be exhausting, but at the same time, it's going to be wonderful. Because I'm very loud about being politically progressive, I have found that the crowds that I've been playing to lately have been clamoring to hear someone who's like-minded, especially when I go to places like Walla Walla, Washington. Like the people who come out to those shows are just very excited to be in a room full of people who, they're not afraid to talk to, they're not afraid to hear from. One of the best compliments I've gotten was my last special. I did about 10 minutes of trans rights on that special, and I had a trans man come up to me who was a server at one of the venues. Actually, I think it was in Philly. I think this was at City Winery in Philly.
Okay.
And he came over to me and he said, "Can I tell you what a joy it was to not have to hate my shift?" Because so many comics he's at work. He's got to listen to them. Like he can't choose to not go to that show. He's at work. And for him to say, I didn't hate work today. I didn't feel like I was the punchline for an hour and a half. And that meant a whole lot to me. And so that's what I'm really proud of on this tour. This tour, I'm not as political on this tour. I'm talking a lot about mental health and anxiety and my own journey with it. It's more of, I guess, a social issue that unfortunately mental health has become political, which it should not be. But, I'm a little of everywhere. So if people want to check out what city, either it's coming up or you missed it. There are very few that I'm not hitting this year.
Well, that is 55 cities in 2 months.
Yeah, I do. I don't, there is only one city where I'm doing multiple days, and that's Salt Lake. And it's just because I had a day off there and the other show sold out almost instantly. And so we just added another one. But I like to just one show in each city. Even if a show like Portland sold out and they were like, "Do you want to add a late show?" And I was like, "No, I'd like to get some sleep." I am, I'm 45 years old. I am fine leaning into my age and also understanding that my mental health is important. And if you want me to have a good show on Saturday, I better only be doing one on Friday. Otherwise, I'm going to be exhausted and not in the right headspace.
And Steve, I have to tell you, I just want to give you kudos for, you talked about mental health and anxiety and your own journey, and you've been very open about that and sharing about that. Where did you draw that inspiration from to be as open and candid as you've been?
So, okay, I wrote a book about high school, about going through and getting bullied a whole lot and etc. The book was not intended to be that. It was supposed to be like just a funny memoir, and then an editor at a young adult publisher wanted to pick up the book, and she was like, "Can you do this just about high school?" And the book just kind of wrote itself that way. It just shaped into this, allegory of, a shy kid who found his confidence. And I didn't think all that much of it. I was like, yeah, I liked writing the book and it was great. And it got a good response. But there was a show where a woman came up to me after the show and she said that her daughter had tried to commit suicide and thankfully failed, and was in the hospital. And, it was about the reason why was because of bullying. And so the mother just looked up some books about bullying and found a lot of them weren't humorous and, had what I think is a dumb message of like, I think people who get bullied need to understand that one of the reasons you're getting bullied is because you're being complicit in it. You are letting it get to you. And like, you can't just ignore the bullying, but you have to know how to address it. And so anyway, she buys my book without knowing anything about me, without knowing I'm a stand-up comic, and gives it to the kid. And she said it changed her daughter's perspective completely.
Wow.
And so now, we're out there at the bar outside the Kansas City Improv, and she's crying and I'm crying. And I just have this realization that, like, I'm never going to be the funniest comic out there. I'm never going to be even in that conversation. But what I can do that a lot of other comics don't do is do it with heart. And that really changed how I look at what I was writing. And I started leaning toward that. And, when you talked earlier about finding your voice, I think you find your voice every couple of years. And being able to lean into who I was becoming as a person, I think became really important. And part of that is, after that, for the first time, I wrote about grief and loss. I did an hour about losing my dad. Then I wrote about caring for the marginalized people in my life. And, my new hour now is about my mental health and my journey with anxiety. And you can do stand-up comedy to make people laugh. But that's the lowest common denominator. All of our job is to do that. Like, it's got to be funny or it's not stand-up comedy. But a comedian who only tells jokes toward, to get a laugh is like a teacher who only teaches toward standardized testing. You are squandering an opportunity to do so much more. And now that so much more can be distracting people from their problems. It can be selling t-shirts. In my case, I want to reach people. I want people to leave a show going, hey, that was really funny, but also I want to talk about that. Like that car ride home, I want there to be something that changed. And that's my goal when I write.
Wow. Well, I have to tell you, Stephen, everything that I've seen thus far, I think that you're definitely succeeding and just looking forward to things to come. Now, one thing I'm curious about with all that you've done thus far, and I know there's still a long way for you to go. As you look back, what would you say you're most proud of?
I am most proud of who my fans are. I am most proud of, and look, there are always going to be weirdos. There are always going to be, you've always got a fringe element no matter what. But I am very proud that, like, I'm not afraid of my fans. I am not disappointed by my fans. I'm not disgusted by my fans. I know comedians who are personally progressive, but they keep it out of their material, or they, kind of toe this centrist line. And then people come to their shows and like they don't want to meet their own fans. They don't want to like these are people they would never hang out with, etc. I'm really proud of who my fans are. I have this program where fans can buy each other tickets. And it started because one of my fans had just reached out and was like, hey, I can't make this show in Appleton, Wisconsin. I'm buying 10 tickets, give them to people who can't afford them. This was like just after people were coming out of the pandemic and a lot of people had lost their jobs and et cetera. And I didn't even know this at the time, but she worked at a grocery store. Like this was not a rich person. This was a person who just decided to be really kind. And seeing that of my fans, the amount of times that someone posts on one of my posts and says, hey, I'd love to see the show, but I just lost my job and I can't, et cetera. And before I can even respond, someone else swoops in and just goes, I gotcha. Here you go. Come to the show. I'll be wearing X if you want to come hang out and say hi. If not, no problem. And like that kind of thing, I am proud of that because who your fans are a reflection of who you are. And I'm very proud to have cultivated a fan base like that.
Yeah, and that whole concept of people helping other people with the tickets and things like that, I've never heard anything like that before. That is amazing. That is absolutely, and a testament to your fans.
It's not something I came up with. Shout out to Steph Andrews. She was the fan that came up with it, and it's something that that a ton of people were doing because of it, and I was really proud of that.
Steve, I have one last question for you. We kind of look back and I asked you about what you were most proud of. What I want to do with this last one is look forward a little bit. What would you say would be the ultimate definition of success for you in your career?
So it has not changed for me at all. From about a year in, I realized that the ultimate success is being able to walk into any comedy club in the world and immediately be asked if you want to go up. That shows that you are universally respected enough for them to say, hey, we're so happy that you're here.
Wow.
Now, that said, it's kind of impossible. It was only a couple of years ago that there's this comedy club in Times Square that is run by people who know nothing about comedy. And Bill Burr walked in to run a set and they had no idea who he was and they did not put him up. And that was only a couple of years ago. This was not like early Bill Burr. This was already household name celebrity Bill Burr. So every is a bit of a stretch, but almost every. And, that's something that like I don't have yet, but I'm getting a lot closer. And, it's been really nice, whether it is the club itself that asks you to go up or one of the comedians on the show. I've gotten to the point now where if I meet a comedian and they don't know who I am, I know that that's because they're new. Just because I've been doing it long enough and enough of my videos have gone viral. And that's nice, but the universal respect is making it. I don't look at it as, oh, I need this television show or I need this many views on Instagram or whatever it is, because all that stuff is, you're famous to different people. But within the industry, that's to me making it. Now, that said, I also don't need to make it. Like I have this year for the first time in my life, I've started thinking about retirement, and not anytime soon, probably in about 15 years. But the idea of if my career doesn't go any further than it's already gone, I'm okay. I have reached enough people. I have done enough things. I am happy. And so if I can, just keep selling a couple hundred tickets in each city, I'm okay. And that's it. That's all I need.
Steve, I have to tell you that last part, I think when you love what you do and you're happy where you're at and you're happy with it, I think that to me is about as successful as you can get. The rest could just be some nice icing on the cake.
Yeah, absolutely. And, everybody has a different definition of success. And, it often changes, depending on your age and where you are and et cetera. The fact of the matter is, if young me saw my credits today, he would be both thrilled and also wondering why I wasn't on shows that don't exist anymore. But I'm happy. I got married last year. love my wife. We have a great life together.
That's
And
awesome.
so, comedy wise, I'm good.
Well, there you go. And that's great. Congratulations on getting
Thank you.
married last year and being happy with that too. Again, just add that to being even more successful in your career and in your life. So, Steve, I want to thank you so much for being who you are, making people laugh, making people think, doing things the way you do them, and just being yourself. So, I wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing you at the Keswick in September, and hoping to have an opportunity to shake your hand and meet you in person, and maybe doing this again sometime down the road.
Absolutely. I'll give you an elbow bump. It's an anxiety thing. I don't shake hands,
Okay.
but I will be happy to meet you and wear a shirt like that. That shirt's awesome. So
Oh, thank you. I
yeah,
will. I'll remember that when I watch it back, and I'll set it aside for
it's
September.
it's it's very much my style.
Yeah, you know what? I know I've seen enough of your videos to know it is,
Yeah,
and secretly one of the reasons why I have it on, because it's very much mine too.
fair enough.
All right, Steve, all the best. And folks, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
This week's episode has been brought to you by Doherty & Company Insurance Services for all your business and personal insurance needs. Our friends at Tennis Addiction in Exton, PA. And the Malin Agency, where exceeding expectations is how they do business.